Okay, folks, we'll get started. And as you heard the little automated voice say, we're recording this right now because there are lots of people who can't make it right at this time, and we want to make sure that everybody's got a chance to access this, whether they're out on the story right now, recharging from another hard night last night, on furlough, whatever. Our purpose here today is to just give each of you some tips and hints and tools when you go out covering the mayhem that's overtaking our country right now. The grievances of so many people are coming out in such visceral ways, and our job is to be out there on the front lines and be a part of it. And that puts us in a position where we need to exercise our First Amendment rights, do so safely within the law, and understand how to both avoid bad situations and get ourselves out of bad situations if we get in them. So I have as guests here a handful of people who any of you can ask questions of. I know I'll be asking questions of. We've got Trevor Hughes. Trevor's in Minneapolis, I think right now, and has been there since things have erupted in Minneapolis. We've got Rob Schumacher and Michael Chow in Phoenix. Both have been out there every night, like many of you, covering from the front lines. We have Steve Elfers, who's covered problems in dozens of countries around the world and been in some pretty sticky situations. And also, like Michael Chow, has the expertise from a photo and video standpoint, which is a very important element of this story. And then finally, we have Garrett Jaco, who's our security chief and has personal protection expertise and ideas to share with us, as well as one of our top lawyers, Tom Curley, can help us understand what our rights are within the law, how those rights change under states of emergency, and what we're willing to do to help you and back you if you get into trouble. So let me first start out by turning to Tom Curley. And Tom, go ahead and unmute yourself if you haven't been. My question, are you unmuted there?
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah, we can. So Tom, my first question to you is, under a duress, under a big situation like what we've been having across the country these last 6 nights, I think it has been, what are our First Amendment rights, and where, in your estimation, should we exercise them, and where is there sort of a point of discretion to withdraw?
Well, big picture here, everything's contextual, right? I mean, it's a bit, I would be naive if I could tell you, sitting here in my office in Maryland, what to do at 11 p.m. tonight on the streets of Des Moines or anywhere else. You've got to have situational awareness, and whatever I say about your rights, safety comes first. It doesn't matter what your rights are. If you feel unsafe, that's the important thing to take care of. But I won't duck the question. There isn't much doubt that under the First Amendment, of course, we have a right to film what happens in public streets and public places. By the same token, the police have broad powers when emergencies have been declared, or there are riots or unlawful assemblies, or other things like that we've seen in the last few days. So I know you need practical advice. Well, what does that really mean? The best recommendation that I can give you is that if a police officer tells you to do something, then, tells you to leave an area, gives you an order, you should comply with that. It's of course okay to say, officer, I'm a member of the press and I'm here to cover it. Is it all right if I stand over here, stand over there? Some officers can be reasoned with, some not. But most of the situations we get into are failure to comply with police orders. Sometimes it's trumped up and alleged, but there's no sort of general overarching right to say the First Amendment trumps what you're telling me here, officer. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the First Amendment rights have vanished. It's a question of when to vindicate them. Most all of the rights that we have as journalists or otherwise, the civil liberties, aren't because somebody won an argument with a cop on the street during a riot. They're because somebody won an argument with a judge. So we have the ability to vindicate these things, but it's very difficult to do that in a moment. And so I know you need something concrete. The answer is, if an officer gives you an order, even if you feel it's unreasonable, of course you can say, officer, I think that's unreasonable, would it be okay? But at the end of the day, you have to obey, you should obey. That doesn't mean we can't fight it. And the last thing I'll say, before I turn it back to you, Mackenzie, is okay, what can we do? we've seen some of our greatest success legally as lawyers during the daylight hours. In other words, we've had curfews in Minneapolis, in Phoenix, in Dallas, in LA, where there were no exemptions for the press, and the police were saying they were going to arrest us. Quickly organized coalitions, and Greg Burton did this in Phoenix, and it's happened other places, got all the media groups together, sent a letter, and the police chief relented. So whatever you can do to lay the groundwork ahead of time with these orders or in terms of interacting with the police is usually the best way to do it. Also, naming and shaming when there's been incidents, recording them, reporting upon them. In some circumstances, Detroit most notably, we got an apology after a journalist was mistreated. I know sometimes that can ring a little hollow, but there are some well-intentioned people out there, or at least people who are susceptible to negative publicity. So much of what we can do legally is before or after, in terms of calling the incidents to the attention and that sort of thing. In the moment, it's very hard to do anything else other than to comply, even if the officer is being unreasonable.
Okay, Tom, that's great. Thank you. I want to ask you in follow-up about two cases that illustrate different points that you're making and might even go a little further. One of the early cases a couple of days ago of a police confrontation with a reporter was that in Minneapolis actually, I don't know if it was Minneapolis or Atlanta, but in any case with CNN's Omar Jimenez. And he was doing a live shot, very well identified as a member of the press, professional grade camera equipment, et cetera. The police wanted him to move off the scene. He said, yes, I'll do it. He did so politely. He did so expeditiously. Where do you want me to go, et cetera, and still wound up getting arrested. And this was all filmed. So what can we take from that lesson? What were the outcomes of that? And how do you assess the way the CNN reporter handled it in light of how we might ourselves handle such a situation?
That is a good one. And honestly, I mean, we've all seen that exchange, and it's illustrative of someone who did something everything right. In other words, he was calm, he was polite, he explained, he said he would move, and he still got arrested. So it shows you at the end of the day, there can be, a difficulty to control any sort of incident with a police officer who's bound and determined to do something. But although that was, an outrage, to be sure, it actually had a very good effect in Minneapolis, again, because the reporter recorded what he was doing, another important thing if you can do it, and acted appropriately and calm and was reasonable. We got an apology, CNN got an apology from the governor the next day, who made an apology to all the media. And when we saw curfew orders in St. Paul and Minneapolis that didn't have exceptions for the media to be out, the governor himself reversed it, and one of the governor's staffers spent a half an hour on the phone with the media lawyer that everybody had gotten together to vindicate our rights. So it's, as unfortunate as that incident was, it was very powerful in terms of setting an example. Again, trying to influence the people who can be influenced to help protect us, which, doesn't often include the officer in the moment who's acting incorrectly, but there are people above him or her who can help. That's great. And last, I want to ask you, Tom, and invite others to have questions and put them in the chat. You mentioned an incident in Des Moines, or with a Des Moines Register reporter. And so what can you tell us about the circumstances of that situation that's within our own company? What went down, and what can we learn from that? Well, I'll be honest with you, we're still gathering information about that situation last night. So, and the most important lesson that we had there was the fact that journalists were working together and recording their interactions. And so we knew almost immediately after she had been arrested, and were able to get, our local counsel in Iowa on the job to try and get her released as quickly as possible. They ended up charging with misdemeanors, failure to disperse and things along that line. And of course, we're going to protest that and object to it. It does not seem warranted in these circumstances at all. But it was simply another situation of being caught up in the moment and perhaps an overzealous police officer. So and we're absolutely blessed to have many wonderful lawyers who I know you work with directly all over the country. And I see Herschel Fink on the call, who's I think of as the gold standard in Detroit. And we had that situation in Des Moines, and we're able to get them. In that circumstance, just so you know, our immediate goal, as you would expect, is let's get this person out of jail, and then let's figure out what happened and investigate and protest and fight these charges. But in the moment, it's all about how can we get somebody across curfew town to the precinct and expedite the booking process and that kind of thing. Most of these are misdemeanors, but of course, you can wind up sitting there for a long time if they're mass arrests. So I'm happy to report, of course, that she was released after a few hours, and we immediately got the newsroom and lawyers involved to help.
That's right. Thank you. And I want to underscore that unequivocally, without exception, we will have your back. We will, if you get into legal trouble, we will ask no questions. We will come to your aid and defense, and we will sort it out through the legal process as fast as we can if you're doing something in pursuit of your job. I want to turn now, thank you, Tom, and Tom's going to be around for the rest of the time for questions. I want to turn now to the folks in Phoenix. We have Rob Schumacher, we have Mike Meister, we have Michael Chow. So if at least those three, so if the three of you could unmute and just sort of give us a sense of your experiences over the last couple of days and especially from a personal safety standpoint, what kind of things have you had to confront? Whomever would like to start from Phoenix, we'd love to hear from you.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I'll start. Since I was out there last night, I did notice a difference. Tagging on to what Tom said earlier about what Greg Burton was able to accomplish with the Phoenix PD, I did notice a big difference in the way the Phoenix PD treated me last night. They were pretty much hands off, and as were normally, they would confront me and be a little more aggressive. But I did notice a big difference in that, so I was able to do my job. It was pretty much a lot quieter last night here in Phoenix because they issued that 8 p.m. curfew. And so there was less violence than in nights past that Rob has been photographing. So, but other than that, large groups, pretty much what Tom said, situational awareness is just watch your back. You know, being a photographer, we always have our cameras up to our faces and we don't see what's around us. In large groups like that, if nobody's watching my back, I'm always looking around and making sure I know what's behind me, who's around me, and who's getting close to me.
And I want to turn to Rob here in a sec, but do you two or other colleagues kind of now work in teams in different ways than you would have, where like literally one person is looking one way and the other person is making sure to cover another point of view, so that if there's some sort of imminent danger that you've got each other's back and you're able to record what's going on from different angles?
We're trying to now.
Yeah.
The first couple nights, because these groups are so large and would split up into 3, 4, 5 groups and then crisscross through the downtown area, you know, we would lose track of colleagues. But the third night of it was the second night of the riots, we were trying to stay near reporters, near other photographers, you know, not necessarily the best use of, you know, all being near each other, but it worked out well when Patrick Breen got gassed bad in the eyes, and me and Sean Logan were able to find a person on the streets that had baking soda water, and, you know, we put him down on the ground and got him good enough where he could drive home after that.
Got it. That's good. And Phoenix team, hang on the line just in case, because people I think might have questions for you. But I want to turn the particular question about the getting gassed and sort of protecting yourself from that to Garrett Jaco. He's our security chief and has experience in these sort of close encounters. Garrett, if you'd unmute yourself. what happens, how do you avoid getting that treatment? And also, if you do, what are some of the solutions that we know work from a physiological standpoint?
Yeah, to avoid getting it's kind of a broad stance, right? I mean, if you're in the large group and they get gassed, or there's the police are spraying pepper spray and it hits you, that's almost an unavoidable consequence. What I would say is make sure you have water on you while you're out and about, and any face covering you can wear, especially if you're getting gassed. It's really particles that you're breathing in, and it's getting those particles to not come into your nasal passages or through your throat, which will help you alleviate the symptoms quicker. It's from a gas perspective, once you get out of the gas and you've had your airway cleared and fresh air, it's going to take a few minutes, but that will clear. From an OC or a pepper spray spot, that can be reactivated time and time again. So it's important to use fresh water, tilt your head, rinse out one side so it's not flowing back over your other eyes, tilt your head the other way, rinse out. And what you want to do as soon as possible, change your clothing as well, because that chemical can stay on your clothing, and you're just reactivating it by touching your clothing, then touching your face. So bringing your own water is definitely a number one thing to do if you're out there reporting. And same for if you get gas. You want to rinse that material off your face by tilting to the left or right, whichever way you're pouring the water, so it's not coming back onto any of your other body parts, but washing completely off your body. Okay. And then,
keep going. Nope,
I was going to say, from a preventive measure, the one thing I would say, speaking to some other security colleagues in news media and law enforcement, is the better you're identified, the less likely in most scenarios it is that you will be grouped in with a large group of protesters. And the other thing that seems to be working nationwide is when organizations are telling local law enforcement, hey, I'm a reporter or I'm a journalist, and this is how we're identifying our journalists. This is what we will be wearing, or we have a red badge that says press on it, or a yellow badge, some clearly identifying marker that has been communicated to the police during daylight hours or during less tense situations to say, this is how I'm identified. And that way they are already looking for you if something does happen.
Okay, thank you, Garrett.
I think
Andy, would you like to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say the flip side of that is we've seen in the last couple of days, I mean, the photographer I know from Reuters was attacked by a guy with wearing, a red cross on his shirt and was going around with a crowbar just trying to attack members of the media. So I think that can be a little bit of a double-edged sword there, to be overly identified.
Right. Thank you, Andy. It's all context dependent. And, I think one of the keys that Garrett's talking about here, and Michael Chow referenced this a little bit earlier, was communicating with the police ahead of time, whether it's through the, sort of more, lawyers and letters, all the way up to like literally introducing yourself to the police. Hey, I'm this person. I'm going to be here. Here's what I'm doing. Tell me how you want me to stay out of your way, et cetera, et cetera. And by building that bridge, hopefully, if you encounter some sort of attack, then they're there to help you and defend you. And those simple sort of gestures of human bridge building can work towards your benefit. I want to now ask Trevor Hughes. If Trevor, you could unmute your mic. You're in Minneapolis at the moment, I do believe. What are some of your observations from the front lines right now that you could share with others?
Sure. I'm actually halfway between Minneapolis and Chicago at the moment at an Arby's. I would say one of the most important...
That is hazardous to your health, Trevor. I just want you to know.
Well, I have cheese curds. So I would say that one of the most important things to think about is this idea of situational awareness. And I ask myself all of the time, am I in the right place? And when we're reporters and photographers, there's a real inclination to be right where the action is. But I find myself asking the question, what value is there in being in the middle of the crowd versus on the side of the crowd? I also tend to think a ton about what we call escape routes and safety zones. So an escape route is just that. Can I go up this alley? Can I go down a side street? Can I go into someone's yard? And then a safety zone is something like behind a car, behind a dumpster, behind a tree. I'll put my back to a tree. I'll put my back to a wall so people aren't coming up behind me. And then the other thing I always try to keep in mind, and this sounds a little silly, is you cannot get arrested or pepper sprayed or tear gassed if you are not on the other end of that police officer. And so I try to be on the side as much as possible. I know there's a real desire by people to be right in the mix, to be right there with the protesters. But if you get gassed, if you get arrested, you get taken out of the game, frankly. And my job, as I see it, is to stay in as long as possible. So I work really, really hard. And maybe it's because I have been tear gassed and pepper sprayed so many times over the years that I've learned my lesson, and I tend to be a lot more cautious than other people, perhaps.
That's great. Thank you. That's super, Trevor. And yeah, you've been through a lot of it, and it just makes me want to sort of do a quick dogleg and mention that this is a traumatic situation, as Trevor crushes a Red Bull. And this is, you're like first responders, all of you who are out on the front lines. And where this becomes stressful, and it should, because you're a human being, we can separately offer you help and support through a number of different channels, ranging from just finding a fellow colleague who might have had a similar experience to talk through, all the way to like actual psychological expertise as well, through the EAP and through other means. So you're welcome to use me to find those resources. We're doing something on Wednesday that's about resilience for journalists, which touches on trauma in journalism. That's at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll record it, make sure that everybody can see it. But if anybody needs help, talk to your HR business partner, talk to me. I'll confidentially connect you with any type of help that you need. Now, Steve Elfers, please unmute yourself if you would. You've reported from 50 or 60 different countries, oftentimes with wars underway. And I don't want to suggest that we have a war happening in this country. On the other hand, I've heard people describe firsthand their experiences that it seems like a war zone, it looks like a war zone, it feels like a war zone. So what lessons can we take from your time all over the globe that are relevant to our safety and exercise of our job?
Well, we've heard a lot of suggestions that would come right out of that playbook. You heard situational awareness. That's really a military term, but you all have used it because it's in common usage these days. I would, the way it's been described, it's really an active type of awareness, right? It's not just, generally being aware, but it's really, not getting tunnel vision behind your camera, having your head up, looking around, understanding what the motivations of these different groups might be. The organizers may have different motivations than folks that have just latched on to the crowd and are looking for an opportunity to loot or waiting for things to go sideways. And so that's what I would, consider that active awareness. It's that the same thing applies if you're in an overseas situation. And I'd say the U.S. military has gotten into trouble when they were unaware of some of the complexities of the situation on the ground. And then you've heard about preparation, and that, what Greg's done in Phoenix to lay the groundwork made it easier for Michael the next day. That kind of thing extends to local coverage day to day. When I was doing local coverage, and had trouble with one particular police officer, I went to the police chief and said, "Hey, who's in charge in these scenes? How should I handle this?" And that problem went away. So that kind of preparation can smooth things out. And when you can't do it, there's sort of preparation in the moment, in the day. To Trevor's point of knowing where to position yourself. If you get to the police line early, maybe it's 2 hours before curfew, and you're going to say, "I'm going to stay upwind on the side," at least that's where I'm going to start until things start to unfold. I might have a conversation with those cops closest to me, identify myself, say, "Hey, I'm going to work from the side here. Is that okay?" Mostly I'm doing that because that way, if things get tense, they at least know who I am. I've had a word with them. There's some connection. Now, as things unfold, you're going to end up in a different place, and that preparation may go away. But and then obviously, knowing your gear, and ultimately you work so hard to get in these situations, to be in a position to tell these stories. You want everything to be from batteries to memory to knowing your gear, it needs to be second nature at that point from a photographer's perspective. So, because there's a lot of other things to be, that are other tasks that are going to overload you if you're not careful.
Okay, super helpful advice, Steve. Thanks. I want to invite anyone who's got questions for the folks that we've heard from so far, or for anyone else to speak up. I'm not 100% sure whether you can unmute yourself or whether you need me to do it. But if you've got something you want to ask or say, and you can't unmute yourself, put that in the chat. While that's happening, let me turn to Garrett again, and that you had some good helpful advice earlier, Garrett, about some really like low tech analog plan situations for what happens when either your technology fails or it's taken away from you, about what to do. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, basically the question was asked earlier, if I'm arrested, how do I know who to call or who to contact? And, this is 2020, I don't memorize phone numbers, and the police have taken my cell phone from me. So some real interesting ideas that were shared today by some other security leaders that are company policy across other news media organizations were, one, you tell your significant other or whoever's number you have memorized, hey, if I get arrested tonight and I call you, this is who you need to call, and they can help out from a work perspective of notifying who needs to get notified so we get that legal help. Or two, even writing the number on your arm. While a piece of paper may get destroyed or taken from you during an incident, the number on your arm that's there in Sharpie most likely will still be readable when you get to a police station and need to make a call to let someone know that you've been arrested. The other thing is we go back to, I forget who was talking about it a minute ago, but if you could stay in groups, if one of you were arrested, then the other person in the group knows to report that up. I understand that you aren't always able to be in a situation where you have 2 or 3 reporters, but those are just some low-tech ways to make sure that you have a plan and, the people that care about you know what the plan is while you're going out there every night to cover these stories.
That's great. We are, thank you for that. And writing a phone number on your arm with a Sharpie is like probably good for tonight. We also are very quickly developing some new identification that has some of this information on it. I'm going to ask Emily Nash to speak to that. And this, she can show some things, share her screen. This addresses a number of the points that Lisa Schwartz in Minnesota made. Christine Stapleton in Florida had a question about that. So Emily, can you tell us what's on the screen and what's going on here?
Sure, these were 2 examples. We're not going to use the one to the far left since that doesn't have a photo or anything, and somebody could end up stealing that or thinking that you just made that on your home printer. But we're looking to get these made up with photos, and what you see in front of you, the back has the legal numbers on it, as quickly as possible. So the goal is to get this template out in all editors' hands today and then determine how to get these printed very quickly, because we do recognize that in some markets they don't have larger press passes or even press passes at all that they're able to display with them. So that is coming today.
Thank you. And if anybody wanted Tom Curley's cell phone number, there you have it, right there. Emily, there was a suggestion as well of maybe going beyond the credentials, like loud. I don't know if it's quite what she wrote, but like a very obvious identifying T-shirt or something like that, loud color, high vis, whatever, anything to sort of make it abundantly clear. And of course, this relates to Andy's point that this could work against us, but have we thought or talked at all about something like that to go beyond the badge itself?
Some markets do have the safety vests that you can find out there, and they've written press with a large black marker or something. What we've suggested is that it's nice to have as an option so that you would put it in a backpack with potentially goggles and a safety helmet and that sort of thing, to have it when you feel it would be a good idea, but not necessarily wear it all the time, because to Andy's point, we've certainly seen examples where journalists are targeted. And so, we sent out a list to all editors, regional editors and others today, just talking talking about what kind of personal safety equipment that is easy to find and get right now, as well as ordering more things like gas masks that are harder to get and will take a few extra days to get. Steve and Andy have been on that, if there's anything else to add.
Could I chime in?
Please do, Christine.
Yeah, I mean, I really felt last night when they started shooting rubber bullets and the pepper balls and everything, if I hadn't had that large sign that said press on my back, I mean, I could have been shot easily. And I just think if we could have something that had press on the front and back, and then let me make a decision on whether or not I think it's going to be making me more of a target or less. But like last night, I think the police, you know, deliberately didn't like shoot at me because they could clearly see that I was pressed because I had this big sign on and it had the name of my news organization on it.
And we could potentially consider like tearaway. I mean, this is from when I worked in Dallas from our flak jackets. We had, you know, you had Velcro press that you could tear off of your plate carrier.
And thanks for that suggestion, Andy. And Christine, one thing I might say is, like, you know, don't wait. We're working as hard as we can to come up with, you know, these solutions and things, but like, don't let you come up with your own solution that 99% as good and is ready 5 minutes from now. You know, if you know, we'll be happy to reimburse you for things if you need to go get that made up or whatever. And it goes along with all the other tools Emily referenced: gas masks, goggles, bike helmets, et cetera. In the chat, I put a whole bunch of links about where to get those things. We'll reimburse for that. I think Andy pulled all those together, but let's not overthink this. Go to Home Depot and get yourself some like painting goggles and a bike helmet like right now. Go get a high-vis t-shirt and a magic marker and write press on it right now. Don't wait for the perfect solution. Good enough is good enough for now, and we'll continue to support and try and get things out as we can. Make sense? Yep. Okay. Who else has questions? We've got a bunch of people with a lot of good experience and capabilities to do things. Does anyone else have anything they want to ask or say here?
Hey, this is Sandy. I was running the network live feed last night, and we were able to see what was going on with one of our video journalists from Bergen. And there was a situation where it got a little tense, and we were all watching the live. And Sean Oates was really great at communicating when things seemed to get heated. But when he got out of the situation, he kept his live pack going so that we were able to record the feed on our end just in case anything were to happen. So if anyone feels like they're in danger or anything like that, or if they're in a hairy situation and you have the capability to go live, please let one of us know so we can monitor your feed. We can capture that feed if you have a tear deck, just in case, you know, as a recording as backup.
That's really great, Sandy. And let me stay with you here for a second. One point that you said that I want to underscore is, you know, not everybody's got a live pack or a Terra deck or a lot of the like weapons grade transmission equipment that you just talked about, but everybody does have the ability to work in teams and watch out for each other. And when it looks like something in danger, that's dangerous to one of our journalists is happening, help them get out of there. And if it looks like one of their civil liberties or rights as a journalist is being infringed upon, record. We need all of that evidence because, as Tom said, the place we're going to get justice is not in the moment, but it is afterwards in the court proceedings and things that set precedents for the future. Also, Sandy, I think you're working tonight, and you've got the plan. You're at Central Command there for gathering and distributing all the video streams. What can you tell us about how folks can participate in that?
Sure. So there is a Teams chat called Network Livestream. If you can't find it, let me know and I will add you to it. But what we're looking for is basically to go live and show all the feeds that we have available across our network. Preferably if you're on TerraDeck, that is the easier way for us to bring in your feed. Steve Elfer sent out a note with some instructions on how to get onto Air Solo, which is an app you can download if you do not have a TerraDeck so that you could stream your feed into Core, which is how we bring your feeds in. If you're not doing that, we can still bring in your feed through Facebook if you're feeding directly to your local property site. It's just a little bit more steps that way. We can't carry too many of those feeds simultaneously just due to computer issues. But yes, if you are going live this evening, please let me know what time and on what platform so we can keep an eye on it. And if you are going live, we would love to hear a little bit of narration about what you're doing, what you're seeing, and know that it's for a national audience who may not know your area locally. So any context you can provide is a great way to, talk to the audience and let them know what's going on.
Thank you, Sandy. And although you are very famous inside Gannett, some people might not know exactly how to reach you. And so if you don't mind over in the chat putting your last name and a contact information for folks, that would be wonderful. I want to circle back and just point out, I may have been not totally clear here. We want, if you're out reporting, we want you in pairs. We don't want you breaking up, just for the common sense safety of that. So the buddy system is in effect, and I want to be really, really clear about that. Other questions that folks have or suggestions? If you're all veterans now, so what can you share with the rookies who are stepping up maybe for the first time tonight?
If I can make one, I'm sorry, one quick addition to what Sandy said, because not everyone might have gotten the network note that went out. If you want to try streaming live to our cloud system, Teradek, with your phone, I will paste some instructions here in the chat, but you will need an account for Teradek, so you'll need to email me so I can invite you to that. If you already have a Teradek account, then this will work. You'll just have to authenticate, and then when you stream from your phone, it will hit our cloud service.
Excellent. Was there somebody else who wanted to share there at the same time as Steve?
I have one thing to pass on.
Please, Rob.
I got a message from Christian Peterson, our local Getty photographer, who gave us a warning and a heads up that Getty photographers around the country have been being targeted online by the protesters and publishing their home addresses. So it's something we all need to be aware of. It's also an issue of do we publish our images on social media right now on our personal accounts, or should we be making sure all our images are just going through branded accounts for safety reasons now?
Okay, that's helpful, and that's a decision probably context specific that you'll want to make with your editor. And there's people like Andy Scott and Steve Elfers who have network-wide responsibilities who can help you make those choices. I want to ask a safety question here on behalf of Rory in Wisconsin. Or Rory, if you would like to speak up and ask the question yourself, you're certainly welcome
to. Sure. Sorry, I'm eating. I was just trying to ask, I was wondering if anyone has experience using any specific solutions to pour in your eyes after you're exposed to tear gas. Seen various people recommending baking soda or milk of magnesia or saline solution, and other people saying certain things are not a good idea. I haven't really found excellent evidence on that, and just wondering if anyone has tips on that, or if you use water, because also hearing that water can reactivate it, so you have to make sure you have enough to really flush it out. So if anyone has any experience on that to share, that'd be awesome.
The best one I know is that I just saw the other night was baking soda and water was extremely effective in about 10 seconds. And then you need fresh water to wash the baking soda solution out of your eyes.
Cool, thank you.
Great.
Awesome. Wear contacts, FYI.
Say it again, Greg. You're talking about people wearing contact lenses?
Don't wear contacts, too.
Yeah, wear your glasses that day. Thank you for that. Greg, while you're there, is there anything that from orchestrating coverage standpoint, there may be editors on this call, there's a lot of frontline reporters and photographers on here, but for anybody who's an assigning editor or an executive editor, you certainly had a front row seat of this and waded through it yourself. Anything that you could share that would help?
I'm just floored by the courage and bravery of all of the journalists on the network. So I'm just, I'm humbled by the work that they do. I think everything that you've talked about, staying in pairs, we've tried to coordinate as much as possible. I think having a great support system. So, don't understaff the people that are trying to help people navigate in the field, because we can figure out where people are through following their social media accounts, through texts, through Teams. So we ought to have somebody who is in constant contact with everybody in the field, so we can respond as necessary, or find them, or get other people to them rapidly. The other thing was, we tried to find a safe place, where we saw the majority of the protests were ending up, someplace that we could get to fast and be secluded. I know, Rob, actually, you actually were in a parking garage, right? You were up on a couple of floors, and we're looking down, and we're somewhat removed from the worst of it on one of the evenings. So if you can identify a spot like that in advance, if you know where the action is going to take place, that's recommended as well.
In quite a bit of ways, I saw some good advice from Giddy photographer in the Carolinas, who says, he just takes one of his cheap kids' bikes, throws it in the car, parks a half mile away or a mile away, and then rides the bike over there, so that his car doesn't, get vandalized. And if you lose the bike, you lose the bike. I've seen a lot of reports of photographers' cars getting broken into, tires slashed, etc. So like parking well away from the action is important.
Yeah, I know a photographer in Los Angeles had their car broken into yesterday. So don't leave gear in cars if you're a photographer. Strap your skateboard to your back, and that's another way to get around quickly.
And also, don't feel like you got to take everything on your person. Like it's, sometimes it might be useful to have, a spare camera and lens, or an old iPad or something in your car stashed. If you did get jacked, you could at least go back and be able to communicate.
That's great. I want to go back to Trevor Hughes, if he hasn't moved on to the next fast food establishment, and ask Trevor, are you still there?
Yeah, still here.
Very good. The question I have for you is, you offered some really sort of just like common sense thoughts about staying on the verge of the trouble without being in trouble yourself. And I would like for you to underscore really quickly, sort of what the warning signs are that it's getting a little hot in here, because we want to document this stuff as best we can, but we do not want you to get hurt.
Right. I mean, a lot of this does come from practice, but it's like if you're in a crowd and you start hearing raised voices and the volume level just starts ticking up, that's a good indication. If you see movement happening, so if the police officers are all in a line and then all of a sudden they put on their gas masks, definitely a trigger that you should step back a little bit. I was covering the protest yesterday in Minneapolis, and we had young people who were sort of marching forward. They would take a step and then take a step and then take a step. And you could see the police officers, you could see their level of preparation increasing. And the guys with the pepper ball guns came to the front. And you're like, all right, now I can see that this is going to happen. So one of the things that's easy to do when you're covering these things is to get caught up in the mix in the middle. And so what I'll often do is I'll put my camera down away from my face, and I will deliberately withdraw from the crowd and reset and say, okay, how does it look right now? And then I will then reprogress maybe forward or up to the side. But the important part is to sort of withdraw periodically so that you are having an opportunity to reassess the safety and the escape route and those safe zones that you're thinking about. Generally speaking, in my experience, you don't get pepper sprayed or tear gassed out of nowhere. There are generally warning signs. And I'm not saying that's always the case, but generally speaking, there's warning signs, and you really want to just be paying attention to what the protesters are doing and the police. And that's why I prefer being on the side, so you can see on this side and this side, because you're looking this way rather than only having one or the other.
Really good tactical advice, and sort of goes back to the situational awareness Steve was talking about. So thank you very much, Trevor.
Yeah, and just to follow on one thing Trevor was saying, he mentioned movement. Watching movement or new movement is really important. Like just watch your periphery. You know, when you see things moving on the side that weren't moving before, that's a good cue that you either need to change your position or reorient, or as Trevor says, to back out. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, crowds are fluid and they're dynamic. And it's normally not just one actor that's going to cause the problem. It's like there's a whole mass that starts moving. So that's where, like, not getting too fixated on one thing and really watching the sides for motion and movement will give you a lot of cues.
Got it. Okay.
Also if I could throw one other thought in there as well, in terms of awareness, you know, especially in things that are fluid and moving, you've got to always be aware of what your potential extraction point is. So not just where are you backing off to, but who am I calling and how am I getting out of here? I mean, if things really go bad, how am I getting out? And so there needs to be someone you can call who can come pick you up, because you may not be anywhere near your car, and you need to be able to say to someone, here's where I am. So you frequently have to be checking in, looking at your phone, looking at street signs, and have an extraction point in mind if things really go south quickly.
That's great, Bill. Thank you very much for that. All right, Nicole Carroll, editor of USA Today. I was going to ask you to, and Emily, to say something to wrap things up. But Nicole, I know you had a question for these frontline experts as well about their tactics, and go ahead and just ask it yourself.
Sure. Well, I guess I just wanted to make sure everybody's aware, if this is the first time you're going out, about some things you're going to encounter. And so I was wondering if Trevor, Michael, Rob, you guys could talk about the flashbangs, the different gases, the bullets. Like, what should people going out what should they be expecting?
Sure. So there's a variety of things. The sort of the first ones that you might see are pepper ball guns. They're paintball guns that fire spray little balls that are full of pepper, and they explode when they hit you. So it hurts it hurts. And then they explode pepper. They'll also shoot 40 millimeter foam bullets. Whenever we talk about rubber bullets, that's what we're talking about. They're about this big. Those also hurt a great deal. Then you've got tear gas, which will make you cry and has a real chemical smell. And then there's the OC, or pepper spray, which has that really spicy, and that can burn the skin. And then this is a new thing, these flashbangs that officers are using. We're seeing a ton of that. They just go off with a very loud explosion, and it startles the heck out of you. And those are really good at turning crowds. And you have to be really careful when any of these are being deployed, because you've got this mass of people that will turn around and run. And if you're not on the side, if you risk being trampled by this crowd coming forward. So those are some of the big things we've been seeing out here in the last couple of days.
Thanks. And I know that a lot of editors and reporters reported a lot of fireworks. I don't know if it's because we're close to 4th of July and people can get them, but a lot of the protesters using fireworks.
Yeah, they've been firing the fireworks at police officers. So I was out in Minneapolis the other night, and there were fireworks going off literally constantly, and they sound different than the flashbangs. And then there was gunfire mixed into all of that, which makes it very, very difficult to understand what the actual risk is. So yeah, be real careful.
That's great. Nicole, is there anything that you wanted to say, or Emily, join in to sort of wrap up or urge our team forward in the night ahead?
Happy to. First of all, I'm thrilled that there's 167 people on this call. And so thank you, Mackenzie, and all who put this on, for getting this together so quickly. We all want to be safe and prepared as we go out there. So thank you all for being here. And I'm with Greg, in awe of the courage and everything in all of you. I went out Saturday night to the DC protest and found Jared Henderson and spent some time with him. I was there for an hour and was exhausted and frazzled, and he was there for 5 hours, and many of you were there for 10 hours. And so I just cannot tell you how much you are appreciated and respected, and we thank you for what you're doing. all of that being said, we don't want any heroes out there. We want to make sure that safety is the absolute top priority. And last night, I know many of you started pulling people out, or you pulled yourself out when it got too hot. And we 100% encourage that. We stand behind that decision every single time it's made. So please don't think you have to be there, that people are expecting you to keep going after it's safe to do so. We 100% support you. When it's time to go, it's time to go.
That's great. Emily, would you like to add anything?
Sure, and I see a question from Brian in here that I can address. We have been having some conversations about whether there would be additional security that would be needed. I mean, across the network, at this point, we've had dozens of journalists who have been exposed to chemical irritants, and unfortunately, it's been worse in some situations. We've had 2 reporters who were assaulted by protesters in the field. One of them was a situation that didn't even seem like it was really going south. It was just, you know, people were looting a mall, and unfortunately, someone turned on him and, you know, assaulted him. And so we've had one reporter who was robbed. And so we're keeping track of all of that, trying to provide people with support and services, get the right equipment out to people. And again, really emphasizing that if people feel unsafe, to back out of situations. Obviously, everyone is doing a fantastic job of coverage. It's been amazing to watch and track. And we've been covering a lot of those protests live on the YouTube channel. And it's been amazing to just see, you know, the level of coverage and what everyone's doing out there. So we want to do everything we can to support and provide help. And so anything you guys need, I mean, please reach out, questions, ideas, that sort of thing, because it's really helpful as we continue talking about these, and we know this is going to continue. And then we're going to think more long-term about making sure that our regional editors have more equipment, things like gas masks and some higher level things that they can more easily deploy in the field. So obviously we're learning a lot as this, you know, sweeps across the country and that sort of thing. So any ideas, but I just really want to underscore what Nicole said and thank everyone, because it's been amazing to watch this over the last several days and see the bravery and teamwork and collaboration.
Okay, great. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Nicole. Thanks to everybody who is an expert, and thanks to everybody who came and asked questions. But most of all, like what both of these leaders have said, thank you for doing the job, the vital job that you're doing right now. We have other resources coming up throughout the week. The same way you found out about this, you could, we have a couple of watchdog seminars that are related to covering the protests coming up tomorrow. We have the Building Resiliency session on Wednesday that I referenced. We have another session that's being put on by the National Press Photographers Association that overlaps a little with this, about understanding your rights, and some other preparation pieces. So those are all coming up this week, and there's more to come for frontline editors as well. If you need anything, I just put my name and email in there, whether it's getting hooked up with somebody for emotional support or some specific bespoke training that you need, or whether it's help getting a hold of supplies and assets that you need to do your job. Let me know, or let Emily know, or let Nicole know, and we'll make sure to help you the best we can. With that, we'll say thank you. Good luck tonight, and above all things, stay safe.